Hello and welcome to another edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. But this is not just another edition, it is USFL season. Don't worry, everyone. Still going to have our usual Tuesday, Thursday pods with Ray McFarland. We'll have our stream on Wednesday. I am not fully committing myself to the USFL. We will be having at least one this week, in future weeks, probably two USFL Center podcasts. If you aren't a fan of the league, you don't have to listen to them. I'm not telling you need to, but at the same time, give it a chance. I am so tired of some of the hatred we've gotten over the years in the XFL and AAF streets because most of it is just nonsensical. They go, hey, this is not as good as college football or the NFL. And guess what? They are right by saying that. But guess what doesn't happen in the spring? The NFL or college football. So we are comparing the USFL on Sundays. It's a 4-game slate weekly against baseball, basketball, golf, all these beta sports that I don't want anything to do with. So we are going to be fully attacking the USFL over here at PFF. Grades, data, content, you name it, we will have it. And we have some fantastic guests here around the industry to help us accomplish this goal. None better than the man I have on today to help us really break through into this league. If you guys have been following him on Twitter at CMain7, Cody Main himself, established the run's finest. My God, man, I like to think of myself as a grinder with some of these spring leagues. I truly enjoy the AAF XFL. I love football, but Cody, man, you've been on this game for weeks. I am so excited to talk to you about this league, man. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks so much for having me on. I cannot imagine not being excited about this league. This is going to be a good time. The hype is starting to build. We are officially in week one. It is Monday of week one. We will have games this weekend, kicking off with a showdown on Saturday. I am very, very, very excited about this league and more than willing to give it a chance, mainly because I love football, but also because we'll have DFS. We got to talk about DFS, baby.
Exactly. And that we will. A lot of times if you follow me on Twitter, I tweet complete bullshit. And a good sign of that is if I put per sources in front of it. I have no sources, everyone. So if you ever see me say sources, I am completely lying. But I said that, in Birmingham, which is where all these games are going to happen. I was like, electric atmosphere. You can't even walk out on the street without seeing people, hyped up about the USFL. And then Jim Nagy, director of the Senior Bowl, decides to respond and says, can't confirm. So maybe there actually is hype going on in Birmingham, Cody. I'm going to believe there is. I do know there's plenty of hype here in these DFS streets. So on this pod, we are going to go through just the overall league at first, and then through each and every team, finish things off with some week one predictions. So starting off, Cody, we have 8 teams. In the North, the New Jersey Generals, the Michigan Panthers, the Philadelphia Stars, and the Pittsburgh Maulers. In the South, the Birmingham Stallions, the Houston Gamblers, New Orleans Breakers, and Tampa Bay Bandits. The teams, about 15 minutes before we started recording, sent out their mascots, and they were asking for help naming them. My best name was for the Birmingham Stallions. It should be Sylvester Stallion. Like, that's genius.
Oh,
Great job by me. And for Houston Gamblers, I said Calvin Ridley. That one's probably not going to make the cut, but you could imagine it. It's going to be a 10-week regular season with the 2 top teams in each division making a 4-team playoffs. Again, all these games will be played in Birmingham throughout the year before the playoffs, and they will go to Canton, Ohio, the birthplace of football. Several new rules on display as well. The extra points, they basically took a page out of the XFL playbook. You can go for 1, 2, or 3 points after the touchdown. Extra point, typical kick from the 15-yard line, 2-point conversion from the 2-yard line, 3-point try from the 10. Onside kicks, you can do traditional, kicking the ball on the onside, or you can actually attempt a 4th and 12 from the 33-yard line, another kind of page out of the XFL book. Clock stoppages are like college football, where the clock will stop following a first down during the final 2 minutes of the second and fourth quarters. Hopefully get some of that sweet, sweet scoring. And for overtime, it's going to be a best-of-3 format where each offense gets a chance to score from their opponent's 2-yard line. If they're still tied after 3 attempts, they will go into a sudden death style. First team to win just one of their matches goes ahead and takes it away. Cody, am I missing anything? And then if not, what are kind of your general takeaways for some of these unique rules and just, the overall just 8-team format?
Yeah, you nailed it with the rules. And we saw some of these things attempted in the XFL and executed at varying levels of success. They tried the 3-point try thing, except they completely removed the extra point. If I remember correctly, you had a 1-point option from the 2, a 2-point option from the 5, and then a 3-point option from the 10-yard line.
Correct.
And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think it was hardly utilized much at all. And
everyone kept going for 1. It was like, come on, guys.
What are we doing? What are we doing in a league that at least the format is trying to incentivize scoring, trying to make things more exciting for a fan base that isn't necessarily as excited as they are for NFL and college football. And we have these coaches out there just doing brain dead stuff, going for 1 every time. So starting there, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of 2 and 3 point attempts in this league, knowing some of the coaching staffs that I do have, having done my research now. I think that will be a little bit more of a talking point than it will actually be utilized. And then the onside kick alternative, which I think is another fun concept, where you get the option to convert a fourth and 12 play from the 33-yard line. If you convert, you keep possession of the ball. If you don't, the team gets it where you're down. I love that rule, but I just don't think it's going to be utilized by any of these teams. Like, I can't imagine any of these boomer coaches going out there, maybe a few, which we'll talk about, but like going out there and deciding to go for a 4th and 12, despite the league incentivizing it and hoping that these coaches will do some of this stuff. So yeah, fun stuff. I'm more excited about some of the things that they're doing to try and engage fans and make it more fun for the fans. A couple of things that they just announced, whether it was yesterday or today, but the first down measurements will be with a chip in the ball. So yes, finally, very cool.
It sounds like it's like tennis, right? Like
exactly.
They basically show the replay. Like,
yeah,
thank you. This should have been done 20 years ago.
So maybe we're still gonna have 70-year-old dudes running around with chains, like as a precaution. But at least we'll have a chip in the ball. We'll get accurate first down measurements and things like that. That'll be fun. And then they're doing some cool stuff like they did with the XFL. I don't know if we'll get player interviews on the sidelines because we had a couple F-bombs dropped there. But they are doing camera access, like a Skyview camera access, and they'll have a helmet cam too, which cut-ins during the broadcast should make things pretty fun. Overall, though, like we both made the joke on Twitter when lines were first released that, like, overall, I think scoring is going to be down. We've seen it in previous versions of this league in the AAF, in the XFL. Sportsbooks, if they'll let you get down action, they expect these games, at least initially, to be extremely high scoring, probably because some of the rule changes, but it just doesn't come to fruition. And we saw that happen with the lines that they released for week 1, at least initially. And I think those have since come down, but we were seeing numbers in the 50s, 55, 55 and a half. I'm just thinking, did the books do their research on who is going to be playing quarterback and who is going to be calling plays in any of these games? Because, man, I would have had these totals pegged closer to 40, 45 than 50, 55.
And that's the thing, man. Like, okay, so I think it was Fox Bet was the one that initially released the lines. I did see some people saying like the max bet on those was only 20 or 25
exactly.
bucks, but I would like to think closer to Saturday and Sunday will actually, I'm sure you can't throw thousands on it, but I would hope we can get a little bit more than 25 in there. But to your point, man, even the drop-offs, I think, are still too high. Like, it was the mid-50s for all these games, and even the kind of shrinking down closer, I think, to actual kickoff. We're still seeing them in the high 40s. In the AAF in week 1, there was an average of 38.25 points per game. XFL week 1 was only a little bit higher at 38.5. By week 5 of the XFL, the opening betting lines for the game totals were 45.5, 37, 39, and 40.5. It was even worse in the AAF, man. Yeah, if there is anything that we can take away right now, it's to pound those unders. Anything like, honestly, it's like 45, 46, man, I will keep taking that under.
So when I posted that tweet, I got a bunch of messages, a bunch of DMs in Slack, in Discord. Should we bet these unders? I'm like, blind betting these unders seems plus EV at this point. Yep. So yeah, 55 and a half, like that's Mahomes, Josh Allen level, 55 and a half. The thing about these offenses too, and we'll learn more, of course, week 1, we're kind of going into this thing blind, but the thing about these offenses, and speaking in general for everyone, the draft was just 2 months ago. These teams haven't even been in camp for 30 days by the time
they started training camp. Training camp was 2 weeks ago, man.
Yeah. So it's gonna be sloppy. And will we see some miraculous plays? Will there be scoring? Sure. But I'm just saying, like, set your expectations low, especially from the jump. These teams have not been together very long. I don't know how you install an entire offensive playbook with guys that haven't played together before, in the most cases, in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So it's going to be ugly at first. I hope people will give it a chance. But first general takeaway from the league is scoring is probably going to be down at the jump.
I couldn't agree more. And look, everyone, these are general takeaways. I do like to think Cody and myself are in, the top 1% of USFL knowledge worldwide at this point. But even then, like, we're going to be so quick to change a lot of what, we're thinking right now.
Yes.
After we see actual football being played. So anyone that has, tried to undertake the USFL grind, Cody and I were talking about this, before the podcast started, we are just completely depleted of a lot of information. We haven't had beat writers out there giving us reports on practice. All these teams scrimmage last week, and we got like one play each shown on, Twitter highlights. And they were more so just trying to show off, I think, some of the new rules and technology that we were talking about. And even like some, RJ was doing the coaching interviews for like Fox Sports and stuff. Even then, like, we're just getting kind of a lot of coach speak that I wouldn't be shocked if and then just kind of throwing us off the scent by the end of everything. So no, we are not pretending to be, complete experts at this point in time, but we're going to keep working, use all the information we have, change our opinions accordingly. Back when I used to play football, one of my coaches made the point where he said, if you're going to make a mistake, you might as well do it full speed. Not so sure that's a great thing for every part of life, but I think for this in particular, it is going to be our strategy. So with that in mind, Cody, let's start going through these teams. I think we, just hearing you talk, I think we kind of have similar approaches for what we can do right now to get the best feel on these guys. And to me, that was really looking at each team's play caller, head coach, and their quarterback. I mean, we can go through the projected skill position players a little bit, and we will, just in terms of trying to get those depth charts figured out. But man, like, if we looked at this 3 weeks ago, I think a objective, smart person will conclude that Eli Rogers and De'Veon Smith were fantastic options. They both got cut. So, like, we really don't know. The main thing I tried to do with the skill position depth charts was I went through the draft and just, ranked them as who got picked first, because at the end of the day, that's the guy that got picked first. We have draft capital, and that is basically it with these guys. So, when I show my projected depth charts, it's just by draft capital, and then, someone that was picked in, the 5th round of the regular draft goes ahead of someone that was picked in the 2nd round of the supplemental draft. And we have also already had some free agent signings as well. So similar process with you, Cody. Like, let's try to figure out kind of the offensive scheme in mind, and the quarterback. Obviously, we'll be quick to, change things once we have any idea what's going on with the defense and the O-line and all that. But right now, it's pretty tough to have a grip on any of those things.
Yeah, of course. And we're going to have a full menu of content at Establish the Run that's got player projections, ownership projections. We'll do a top plays article, and we will have a live show. But my goal for week 1 and for all of our subscribers is to not make too many mistakes. I don't think we're going to have anything remotely close to accurate. And hopefully we're just slightly better than the rest of the people out there that haven't been putting in as much work as we have. But we do have previews up on the site right now. And what you went through for explaining your process was basically mine as well. Going through each team's coaching staffs and deciding how they called plays at previous levels of football. We've got the Tampa Bay Bandits up now, so you can think, what was Todd Haley's coaching tendencies like at Pittsburgh or at Kansas City or with the Browns, and how can we apply that to the USFL, knowing how these rule changes are and how spring football plays a little bit differently. And then secondarily, we know obviously quarterback's most important position on the field. What can the quarterbacks do? Are we going to have any good quarterback play? Will we have guys that separate like we think maybe Jordan Ta'amu does with the Bandits? So starting there, and then, you can try and sprinkle in some micro level thoughts on player target shares and rushing shares. But like I said, the goal is just to not make too many big mistakes for week 1. Once we have actual data to apply to projections in week 2, we hope to get a little bit more accurate. And obviously using a lot of the stuff that you guys do over at PFF with grades and snaps and routes and things like that will be a huge, huge help to anyone that is trying to play DFS or make bets or props if those are available. But right now, again, to reiterate, just try not to make too many mistakes.
Amen to that. And with that said, let's go ahead and get into these teams. We're going in order of my, subjectively objective, whatever, how the hell you want to say it, power rankings for this group. Cody, originally I had them listed just in terms of their championship odds. I'm fading the Michigan Panthers as a top team, though, in the league, though. Miss me with that BS. I do believe the Tampa Bay Bandits at plus 450 are, the class of the league right now. We'll see what happens with that. But I think with the quarterbacks, man, to me, like, there's a pretty big drop off after the first 3 or 4 guys, maybe even less than that. But to your point, we do have Jordan Ta'amu, who previously was known as that guy where everyone talked about, like, how could an Ole Miss offense with DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, Dawson Knox not put up bigger numbers? Well, it was because of Jordan Ta'amu. However, he has improved past then. Most notably did get to work as Lamar Jackson on the Chiefs scout team, and then went in the XFL and was really their second best quarterback behind only PJ Walker. He will be working under head coach Todd Haley, as you brought up, former formerly with the Chiefs, Steelers, most recently the Browns. I'm more inclined to fade that last Browns tenure, just in terms of Hugh Jackson. I always talk about everyone's fine dismissing Hugh Jackson, except when it comes to pigeonholing Duke Johnson as a scat back. So I'm going to continue to stick by my morals there. Look, I don't think Haley's necessarily dealing with Big Ben or Antonio Brown anymore. But with that said, man, he was out there. Steelers from 2012 to 2017 ranked 11th in situation neutral pass play rate. I think Haley, even though he's been removed from the game a little bit, I think he was just coaching at the high school level in 2020. To me, man, Todd Haley and Jordan Ta'amu might be the single best head coach quarterback combination we have when trying to project an upside passing game.
I think this is by far, going into week one, the best quarterback coach tandem in the league. And I think we run into a similar situation that we had with the Houston Roughnecks with PJ Walker, where he just completely separated from the field. And that included Ta'amu in that league. As you mentioned, Philip Walker, or PJ Walker, was the highest scoring quarterback in 4 of 5 weeks that the XFL played. And the only week that he wasn't, it was because Jordan Ta'amu went nuts and did things with his legs, did things through the air. And I think we're going to see the same thing here. You mentioned it, like the Ole Miss, looking back, the Ole Miss stuff just seems crazy, but he had a little bit of a resurgence in the XFL and was truly remarkable just in terms of his completion rate, touchdown rate. Everything looked phenomenal for him. And I think that's going to carry over here. I think, just speaking again, generally, I think that this league is a little bit of a step down in competition from the XFL. You'll see a lot of names carry over, but I do think that generally the XFL is a little bit more talented league. So I think he's going to be facing potentially softer defenses as well. But just off the jump, man, I agree with you with your power rankings. I think this is the number one team in the league, and this passing offense, I think, is going to be a force to be reckoned with.
The one thing, and look, the floor for these quarterbacks is so bad. I think, even removing what I'm about to say, we can have confidence in Ta'amu, at least as the most fantasy-friendly quarterback in the league. Mm-hmm. But as someone that sadly watched each and every single one of those XFL, I don't need to say sadly. I embrace who I am. As someone that happily watched all of Jordan Ta'amu's games, it was a gimmicky offense, man. I mean, the St. Louis Battlehawks, they had easily the most RPOs in the league. They were the most run-heavy offense in the league, 23% play action rate. So Ta'amu, it was a Garoppolo-esque 6.4 yard average target depth. He was not his highlights compared to PJ Walker, not even in the same stratosphere. So I would say, I think maybe his stats were a little bit inflated and it was, a fantasy-friendly offense. But hey, he executed it, man. And I've talked about this a lot, looking at the quarterbacks for this upcoming draft class. But I want to be careful about penalizing someone for doing great in their system and just maybe not being asked to be a pro-style quarterback and stuff. So is Matt Corral a worse prospect than Desmond Ridder because he wasn't even asked to do the pro style stuff that Ridder did at a pretty decent level? I don't know, but I want to be careful about just only holding that against the guy for not doing it, because maybe he can do it when asked to. So Jordan Ta'amu obviously looking like the best fantasy quarterback right now. We get to Kyle Sloter, maybe the best real life quarterback, in a minute. Now, the big thing with this depth chart, as things stand right now, and we can still see some releases and stuff before week one, but Tampa Bay, one of just 2 teams with only 2 running backs at the moment, and they're one of only 3 teams with just 2 tight ends. So looking at this group, man, BJ Emmons to me is arguably the number 1 fantasy running back we should be going after, because again, there's only 2 running backs in this offense, and their second running back, Juwan Washington, is just 5'6", 190 pounds. Emmons has 215 on him. So I don't know if we're looking at prime Le'Veon Bell here, but man, just based on week 1 opportunity, BJ Emmons, I think, should be at the top of this position.
And again, how much of this stuff from the NFL is going to carry over to the USFL for Haley? Because we knew with Le'Veon Bell that he wanted to pound one running back as much as he could. Obviously, different talent level between Le'Veon Bell and BJ Emmons. But BJ Emmons is a former 4-star recruit. He did play at Alabama, and then he had a bunch of lower body injuries that forced him down to lower levels. Signed with the Raiders as a UDFA. As you mentioned, man, he's a big 6 foot, 220 pounds, and I think he's got feature back upside. As we'll get into it with these teams when we're thinking about fantasy for week 1 and trying not to make as many mistakes with only 2 running backs available, the other guy being 5'6", 190, I think we can pretty confidently say, and being confident in this offense, at least going into week 1, I think we can pretty confidently say that BJ Emmons is among that top tier of running backs.
100%. I hope he does get that 3-down roll, man. It was Le'Veon, but remember, like Le'Veon got suspended. D'Angelo Williams stepped in. He took every snap. Week 17, like Stephon Ridley was out there playing every snap. Hopefully Emmons can be that guy in the USFL. Now, the wide receivers and tight ends, I think this is where we're doing the most guesswork here. With the running backs, I think we can kind of look through the size, if they have the pass down ability, but the wide receivers and stuff are going to be a little bit more difficult. Based on draft position, we would think the big three are going to be Derrick Willis, Derrick Dillon, and Jordan Lastly. At tight end, we have Cheyenne O'Grady, sorry for the name, man, and Daquan Hampton. They're actually pretty interesting because, again, we only have the two tight ends here, and O'Grady actually had 87 catches, 967 yards, 12 touchdowns career at Arkansas. Hampton is someone that was listed in college as a wide receiver, so we could have some, allure towards that. Cody, have you seen like what the actual DraftKings position? Do we have to actually roster a tight end?
Yeah, everyone lean in really closely because I have some inside information. If you guys remember playing XFL DFS, it was one quarterback, one running back, two wide receivers / tight ends, two flex, and one DST. So we do not have to roster a tight end.
Fuck tight ends then.
You said it, not me. Some of these guys will be interesting, but I think, and we'll have a column coming out because DraftKings will be releasing contests soon. We'll have a column coming out just how to attack the DraftKings position requirements that are a little bit different with the XFL and USFL. But no, we do not have to roster a tight end. And the one running back thing, as we get through these teams and talking a little bit about BJ Emmons too, it'll be interesting because there aren't too many opportunities to attack. So only having to roster one is extremely exciting. Obviously, BJ Emmons makes a little sense. Getting to these wide receivers / tight ends, man, it is tough. And just to take everyone at least a peek behind the curtain into my week one process for trying to project target shares, a lot of it, like you mentioned, is going to be based off of draft capital. You would think, and if you guys read anything about how the draft went, a lot of these quarterbacks, in fact, most of them, almost all of them, were sitting alongside their coaches as they were drafting. So you would think if Jordan Ta'amu is sitting next to Todd Haley, he's drafting wide receivers that he knows of, is familiar with, likes, whatever the case may be. So that's a big part of my process, is looking through draft capital like you did and ranking the receivers just in order of when they were drafted. And then second, I'm looking at how capable they were of earning targets at different levels of football. So were they obviously most of them, all of them probably played in college. Did they play in the NFL preseason? Did they play in the spring league? Did they play in AAF? Did they play in the XFL? Do they have any connection with Ta'amu, as some of these guys on this team do? And then from there, I'm trying to make kind of just ranking of how I project these wide receiver target shares to break down. Starting at the top of this depth chart, I do think now with Eli Rogers removed, Derrick Willis having the highest draft capital and showing at various forms of football that he was a target earner, a big dude. And he was capable of earning targets through NFL preseason competition, had a 20% targets per route run rate in preseason action, 6'4", 207 pounds, a massive, massive dude. I think this is a guy in an offense that we think is going to be pass heavy, can profile as a number one wide receiver. So starting there, Derrick Willis, totally excited about him week one in my Ta'amu stacks.
Where did I put? I've got some way too early rankings going on. I got Willis, wide receiver 3 overall.
Love it. Let's go.
Love that.
Let's go
behind it. And that, bringing up just his size, that was another thing I just tried to use a little bit, because like some of these teams, like we're talking about legitimate, like 160-pound wide receivers being at the top. So I think you can kind of do some guesswork to see who is going to be there in the slot and everything. So that basically wraps up the Bandits. Again, they are my number one ranked team. Cody, sounds like you are on the same page there. Head coach, quarterback combo just seems great. And that willingness with Haley to seemingly embrace a pass-heavy offense. Hopefully we get some great running back production and usage from Emmons as well. Number 2, I got the New Orleans Breakers plus 550 to win the championship. They are led by head coach Larry Fedora and offensive coordinator Noel Mazzone. Basically, Fedora was the Baylor offensive coordinator and QB coach in 2020. Before that, I believe at North Carolina. Went pretty terribly in 2020. Get used to that. These guys are coaching in the USFL, not really because they've had much better chances elsewhere. Same thing with Mazzone, offensive assistant at UConn in 2021, but he was with Kevin Sumlin at Arizona from 2018 to 2020. Those Wildcats offense offense is ranked 43rd, 77th, and 119th in scoring. Not great. Again, though, this is just a projection going from college to the USFL. They very well could still be bright minds, in this league. So any major takeaways with these coaches, Cody? I'm not, I think it's better than some other teams that we'll get to that really seem like they have two guys that want to establish the old run. At a minimum, I think, coming from Baylor and Arizona, hopefully we can just anticipate a spread heavy attack.
Yeah, so this is where it gets interesting, and we're trying to translate how these coaching staffs worked in previous versions of football and how it's going to apply to the USFL. When I initially looked at Fedora's offense, I thought, man, this is pretty neutral in terms of pass run rate. But then you apply it to what college football was and what the college football pass rates are, then he looks like he's a pretty pass heavy coach. He dropped back at a 53.2% clip while games were within one score in his time at North Carolina, and compare that to a 46.9% pass rate from all college teams. It looks like he's pretty pass heavy relative to the competition he's playing against. So I have my hopes that this will be another pass heavy offense, because we'll get to some that are not pass heavy by any means. So I am expecting Fedora to run a pass heavy offense. And the other thing is, he had an interesting quote on that RJ Young podcast that you referenced when he was on there, that he mentioned he didn't know how to get in a huddle because he played so much no huddle, so much up tempo with pace, that he didn't know how to run a huddle. So he had to lean on Noel Mazzone to figure out how to formulate a huddle. So I think we're going to see a lot of no huddle, a lot of pace with this offense, and hopefully at least 50-50 pass run. We can't have another one of these coaches be 60-40 run pass. So I am pretty excited about this offense, and do agree with your ranking them as the number 2 team in this league.
Main reason for that is going to be their quarterback, Kyle Sloter. I despise that he wears a glove only on his throwing hand. Like, if you're going to do it, just put 2 on, go the Teddy, go the Teddy Bridgewater route already. But you do look at what he's done, man. And against actual NFL competition, he is the most accomplished quarterback of this group. Yes, it's preseason, but we don't have anything better. And I would rather see the guy put up good numbers in the preseason compared to arguably being the worst quarterback that we've seen in the preseason, which does apply to 2 of these starters in Clayton Thorsen and Alex Makuu. So Kyle Sloter, man, I was, PFF, we have some fantastic preseason data and stuff. And some of the stuff with him was just absolutely bonkers. Like, it's like that kind of meme showing all the soldiers, around the corner, and they got the one clown in the group. That's Kyle Sloter, because if you look at what he did with the Broncos in the 2017 preseason, only Patrick Mahomes, Phillip Rivers, Dak Prescott, and Russell Wilson had a better PFF passing grade. Like, it's just insane how good he was, man. 9.6 yards per attempt, 78% adjusted completion rate. And then he goes to the Vikings, and he has an 8 touchdown to 1 interception TD to INT ratio from 2018 to 2019. So he's been good enough to bounce around various NFL practice squads. We're not getting much of a rushing floor. One fun fact I found on Google was he allegedly ran like a 4.65 40 in someone else's sneakers at some point. But in the preseason career, we've only seen 47 rushing yards and a touchdown. So, Cody, for me, real life rankings, I would put Kyle Sloter number 1 right now based on some of that preseason excellence we've seen. I still think Tiamu, with that rushing upside, maybe better offense, probably gets the fantasy nod. But Kyle Sloter, man, I think, in a league where we don't have many quarterbacks that have ever played at a high level of football at the professional level, at least Kyle Sloter has done that.
Yeah, and I think back to some of these traditional pocket passers in the NFL who can support multiple wide receivers and can support big wide receiver production for fantasy, but are guys that we rarely look to roster just because they don't have that rushing upside. And now we've got all these Konami code quarterbacks that do have the rushing upside and can throw. But Sloter is going to be one of those who I think is a traditional pocket passer with Fedora and Mazzone. I think he's going to run a pass-heavy system. I think the wide receivers here in New Orleans, and we're going to have to figure out, we're going to try and parse through the information and figure out which one we want to roster. But I think Sloter's going to be able to support multiple of these guys, even going back prior to the preseason. And we'll look at some of these quarterbacks who played collegiately. The numbers weren't good for them collegiately either. So looking at Sloter out of North Colorado, at least had a 62.3% completion rate, which is really good for some of the quarterbacks in this league. 29 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Again, signed as a 2017 UDFA. The fact that he could stick around practice squads, as you mentioned, as long as he did, is a pretty good sign that NFL coaching staff saw something in him. And then to ball out like he did in the preseason, I would liken the preseason competition that he faced to the competition that he's going to face in the USFL. So if he can complete 74% of his passes over a pretty good sample in the NFL preseason, I think we've got to feel pretty good about his ability to complete passes here.
backed up by Zach Smith. It's a pretty just, I said it was a centered skill position room just because we talked about the Bandits only having 2 running backs and 2 tight ends. We see a couple teams like that have kind of a funky, just overall depth chart. It does seem to be fairly normal here in New Orleans. Running back room, Larry Rose, Jordan Ellis, and TJ Logan. Wide receiver group is led by Sean Poindexter. Johnny Dixon, Ohio State, great. Jonathan Adams, Tywon Taylor from the Titans, and Chad Williams, 3 tight ends that, again, unless we have something particular to say about these tight ends, I think we'll more or less be dismissing them for the rest of this pod. What stands out to you in this running back room, Cody? To me, it kind of seems like it's going to be a committee because we have Larry Rose, very familiar. Anyone that's been, in these developmental league DFS war rooms over the years, he was the first pick. You'd like to think that he's going to be plenty involved, but Jordan Ellis is the one that actually has the 220 pounds on him. Maybe he's going to be a really down grinder. Then we have TJ Logan, who has the history with Fedora at North Carolina. This seems to be screaming 3-back committee.
That was the most interesting thing to me as looking through this. I got pretty excited about the Logan Fedora connection, but it does appear to be a 3-back committee as it stands right now. Fedora in his time at North Carolina never gave a lead back more than 53.5% of the backfield's rushing attempts. So it does seem like having 3 of them on the field and 3 of them that appear to be pretty evenly talented and capable of handling the workload. I don't think we're going to see one of these guys totally split from the group. So for me, knowing that this is a pass-heavy offense, although I expect it to be pretty efficient and score plenty of points, I think that this backfield is, for the most part, until we learn otherwise, a stay away.
That was the most frustrating part about some of these, like looking at some of these coaches who were bad in their ending collegiate career. And then you look at like the individual stats and it's like, not only were you bad, but you couldn't just feature a player or 2 and get them some numbers. Like, I think it was like Skip Holtz. He hasn't had a 2,000-yard passer, a 1,000-yard rusher, even like a 650-yard receiver in the last 3 years. Like, come on, man, put up some numbers somewhere at some point. But yeah, we are expecting some passing goodness out of this offense. To me, man, Sean Poindexter, 6'5", 225 pounds. I mean, he's someone we can get excited about. I know all of fantasy Twitter was having this, big talk about contested catches and stuff. And we can talk about that more in, the NFL side of things. But I don't know, man. I'll take bigger is better in a league full of, cast-offs and stuff like that. So Poindexter, was someone that scored 11 touchdowns with Mazzone at Arizona. To me, I'm expecting him and Johnny Dixon on the outside, probably with Tywon Taylor in the slot. Is that kind of how you see things going?
I think so. This is one of the most talented wide receiver rooms in the league. I think, as you mentioned, Poindexter off the top. When I saw Tywon Taylor was drafted 4th with like legitimate NFL experience, not just preseason experience. This dude was a legitimate NFL wide receiver for a while.
I think he started for 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought initially that, hey, this is going to be automatic. Tywon Taylor in the slot, Sean Poindexter outside, and then Johnny Dixon opposite him. Now I'm wondering because these guys seem pretty high on Chad Williams and Jonathan Adams. So just a quick note here on Jonathan Adams, because he's probably the one people are least familiar with. Blake Anderson, who was the OC for Fedora at UNC, coached Adams in college at Arkansas State. He's 6'2", 210 pounds, went 79, 1,100 yards, 12 TDs in his senior season. And Anderson raved so much about this guy that he basically forced Fedora to move him up his draft board. So, you kind of have to take these things with a little bit of a grain of salt, right? You kind of have to go based off of previous production and things like that. But he's got the profile, he's got the size, he's got the connection with the guy that Fedora obviously trusts, his former OC. So I think there could be a little bit of a rotation here. I think we could see all 4 or 5 wide receivers play quite a bit. And that goes back to that point. We think Slaughter can support a couple of these guys. We just need one of them to separate a little bit. We don't need them to be a 24, 25% target share type of guy. But if we can get, 18, 19, 20% with a positive pass rate over expectation, plus a guy that's going to complete a lot of passes, some of these wide receivers in this offense are going to do really well, I think.
And that's going to be, the big thing to really look at. And when we get those week 1 snaps and routes, something that my usual co-host Dwayne McFarland always talks about is just how tough it is for wide receivers with a sub 75% route participation rate to put up big numbers because they're just not on the field enough. So we are, looking at some offenses. I think Philly's another one where we could just potentially see Philly and New Jersey, maybe the other ones where we could just see 4 or 5 guys kind of constantly rotating, unfortunately, maybe sapping some of the value away from each other. But yes, your New Orleans Breakers, my number 2 team in the power rankings, mostly because of Kyle Slaughter. Hopefully we get a Slaughter Tiamu championship game by the end of the year. This next team is maybe the most interesting, Cody. The Philadelphia Stars. We're getting the band back together. Bart Andrus, he's been doing developmental leagues his entire career, seemingly NFL Europe, CFL, Spring League, and he was like the Team 9 coach for the XFL. They kind of had this regular team that was like full free agents that they consistently trained. Must have been depressing as hell to be on that team, but I kind of see where the idea was coming from. Anyway, Andrus, is involved enough in these things to continue to sign up for one league after another, and had a lot of success in the Spring League, Cody, and that takes us to the QB1. Brian Scott, we have almost nothing on this guy other than his excellence in the Spring League. I was watching some of his highlights yesterday, tweeting about it, and Brian Scott did follow me on Twitter. So keep that in mind with this conversation, because I am now a lifelong Philadelphia Stars fan and going to favor Brian Scott regardless of what he puts out there on the field. But seriously, man, the guy went to Occidental College, never even caught on with the practice squad. With that said, man, and you know this better than anyone, Cody, Spring League stats are a freaking nightmare to find. But on a YouTube highlight video, if we can take this creator at his word, he did lead the league's number one scoring offense, 32.5 points per game. He was the Spring League MVP in 2020. And you look at the highlights, the dude's throwing downfield in the tight windows. I'm not so sure we're getting like a ton of dual threat goodness from the guy. But man, again, in a league where you said this before, like we have quarterbacks that sucked largely in college, didn't get a chance anywhere else, and maybe they sucked elsewhere too. At least Brian Scott, within the last 2 years, has played football at a high level, regardless of the competition he faced.
Anyone that follows me know that I'm pretty much willing to lean on the data wherever I can. That's been evident in all the showdown work that I've done and anything else that I've done. But this is the one area where I've decided to kind of throw data out the window.
Let's go.
And I'm leaning on continuity. I'm leaning on familiarity. I'm leaning on Bart Andrus's love of freaking developmental football. Like, we'll get into some guys who I just like legitimately don't think they even care that they're here. One guy that we're both fading pretty hard, but like Andrews is legitimately happy to be here, I think. And the fact that he's bringing the band back together, it isn't just Brian Scott bringing him back at quarterback. He's got wide receivers that are coming with him. He's got offensive linemen that are coming with him as well. So this team's rolling deep, bringing the Spring League champions of 2020 to the USFL. And yeah, the Spring League is a lesser version of the USFL. The competition level is certainly not as good as what we're going to see here in the USFL, but this dude dusted Zach Mettenberger for the starting job in 2020. Like, Zach Mettenberger was a quarterback at LSU, right? Like this is a guy that I think is going to be good in these type of leagues. So you mentioned his stats, MVP trophy, TSL champion, and Andrews as a play caller is gonna be extremely pass heavy. He talked.
That offense looked so wide open, man. It seemed like every highlight was like 5 wide, no one in the backfield.
And that's exactly what he's gonna do. And he's been doing this for a long time at all different levels of football. And it goes back to like 1996. I think in that RJ Young interview, he said that he was coaching a college game and they didn't know what they were going to do. They were worried about that they were going to get their asses kicked. And he says he goes out and we're just going to outscore them. So he did. He went no huddle, passed almost every play, beat them 72-8. And I think from there, he was just a lifelong fan of actual fun football. So we get Bart Andrews, who has familiarity with his quarterback, has familiarity with his offensive line, and with some of the wide receivers that he's bringing over. I think that's going to set up big for them starting week one. We just talked about how these teams don't have a lot of time together for training camp. They don't have a lot of continuity. But when you bring in 4, 5, 6, 7 guys from a team that just won a championship at a slightly lesser level in 2020, I think you've got a good head start, man. I think this is a good starting point for a tandem in Brian Scott and Bart Andrews that people don't know a lot about.
Yeah, we got Philadelphia Stars at the New Orleans Breakers in week 1. Dude, it's a good line. I'm seeing Philly favored by 2.5, which I do think is probably fair based on the continuity. Unfortunately, I think we have the best 4 quarterbacks all facing each other in week 1. So that's the only kind of part where I'm a little bit hesitant.
This will be interesting because we just talked about all these unders, and I don't know if this game would get to 53.5 or 55.5 or whatever it was pegged at initially, but this is one where I could easily see it shooting out, right? Like we got 2 good quarterbacks, 2 coaches that want to throw a lot, and one side has some offensive continuity that they can start moving the ball pretty early on. So this is one game as we look ahead towards week 1 lines and week 1 DFS, man. This is one where I know the general DFS public is aware of Ta'amu. Anyone that played XFL DFS is aware of Jordan Ta'amu. I don't know how much these guys are aware of Brian Scott and Cal Sloter. This is going to be a fun game.
That's why the Stars are third in my power rankings, because everything else, the continuity, I'm with you. I am buying into that. But ultimately, I do think Tiamu and Slaughter, like I just believe in them a little bit more than Brian Scott. Maybe that changes after week one. I am very excited to see what he is cooking with. But yeah, you mentioned, man, Darnell Holland was with them with the Spring League Generals. I believe Devin Gray. There was a couple receivers that were as well. And to your point, some offensive linemen. Holland, to me, is someone that I think does deserve to be in the upper tier of running backs we're paying attention to. Seems like he can catch the ball. We do have Matt Colburn. Again, we got just a few scrimmage highlights, and one of them, he caught a touchdown pass, so that's better than not having a highlight of you catching a touchdown pass. Paul Terry is someone who is technically maybe a running back or maybe a wide receiver. So there are a couple of situations like that. There's some tight ends being listed as a tight end / fullback or whatever. So again, I think we'll have far more clarity after week one. But man, Holland, he was the first running back they picked, and he goes back to having the experience with Andrus in the Spring League. I think he's someone that we should be leaning on out of these three running back committees.
I agree. I do peg this as a 3-back committee off the jump, but I would love to come out of week one wrong here and just hope that he separates and is, a 45, 50% rushing share back and gets targeted 8, 9, 10% of the time and kind of puts these other two guys in the dust. But I'm not so sure about that. I think Andrews is fully able to lean on a committee here. And I think that Holland will be the lead back in a 3-back committee, but I'm trying to target these 2-back offenses, and especially only having to roster one of them. Holland might be the first man out.
That's the thing, man. I mean, we'll get to Groshek in a little bit, but I think between Emmons and Groshek, like it's just so hard to really get behind anyone else at this point. Hopefully, we do have some extra guys emerge in the wide receiver room. Devin Gray, Jordan Sewell, Brennan Eagles, DeAndre Overton, Maurice Alexander, and Chris Rowland. Any, I guess, just major overall takeaways from this group? We do have Bug Howard at tight end, who is one of the more accomplished ones in the league. For the life of me, I don't know why, like he didn't report to camp, and then he did like a week later. So Bug Howard's like been all over the transaction reports so far. Who are you expecting to kind of lead this passing game?
Speaking about Brian Scott and being a Twitter OG, he followed you, liked some of your tweets. He follows me too and liked some of my tweets. And I tweeted out because I was excited about Bug Howard, and this was before I knew the roster requirements. But when I saw that Bug reported for camp, I just tweeted out Bug is back, and Brian Scott liked that tweet. So of course, off that news, I had to bump his target share up about 5 or 6%. But my biggest takeaway in doing research for the Stars was Brian Scott has a type. And I sent out this tweet too, and he liked this tweet too. Jordan Sewell is 6'6", 205. Brennan Eagles is 6'4", 229. DeAndre Overton is 6'5", 209. And if you watched his YouTube highlights, he loves throwing these tight window contested catches with just big ass dudes that can go up and get the ball. And Jordan Sewell was one of those guys who put up big numbers with him. Again, these numbers are really hard to find. There's like no actual data source for them. You're just kind of scraping YouTube highlights and getting what you can. But Jordan Sewell was a guy that put up big numbers with him. Devin Gray played with the TSL Generals as well. There's got so much continuity that I'm leaning on that in week one. I think that Sewell's got the skill set. He's got the size. He's got the rapport with him, and he's got the draft capital. This is the guy that I think is going to be kind of at least from the beginning, kind of the wide receiver one for the Stars. And I hope that's right, because I'm super excited about this kid. If you just look at him on a football field next to other human beings, he's freaking massive. I think the 6'6" or 6'5", whatever he's listed at, might even be wrong. This dude is huge.
Yeah, I'm making a note to move Sewell up in the old ranks after that. Great shit, Cody. Man, I want Brian Scott to be good so bad. Yes. The fact that he's like digging through, looking at all these tweets, fantastic. Because, just in general, people don't tag players unless you're just being super nice and like you want to tell a player you love them, you're thankful for them. Send good vibes. Don't tag them. Now, if they want to go dig through tweets, search their name and stuff, and then come to something, okay, it is what it is.
Right.
But, spread those positive vibes. It's April. We're talking about a bunch of guys that maybe haven't exactly seen their professional careers go the way they want. Let's try to collectively not be dicks as much as possible. Again, Philadelphia Stars, my number 3 ranked team in the power ranking. Is that kind of where you're approaching them too, Cody? Because again, love everything about the coaching staff and the continuity. It's just Brian Scott. I think their odds though at plus 600 out of any championship odds, I think I would probably like Philadelphia Stars value the most.
Yeah, and I don't know, you guys might not be able to get a ton of action down if you are looking for championship odds on any of the books that are offering them right now, but you can find the Stars at plus 650. And as we'll get into, and as you just saw with our rankings, with Ian and I's rankings, like we have the Tampa Bay Breakers or Tampa Bay Bandits and the New Orleans Breakers as 1-2. Those teams are both in the South. and one team is going to come out of each division. So I think that I agree with you that they're probably the third team in the league, but I think they're the best team in the North, and I think they're the best team in the North by a little bit. So I think if you're looking for a bet, just a team that can make the championship game, I think the Stars have a better chance if my assessment of Scott and Andrews is correct than whoever's going to duke it out between the Breakers and the Bandits, because I think the North Division is just a little bit softer than the South.
It's a great point, man. I think we're about to start to get to these other North teams that have the coaching staffs that give us a little pause. First of all, Jeff Fisher and the Michigan Panthers, flanked by offensive coordinator Eric Marty, who spent the last 6 years head coach of Reedley College and more recently offensive coordinator for Grambling State. This is where I start to, what I mentioned before, where we see some of these coaches like, okay, let's see what they were doing at these schools. And then you're like, what the hell, man? 17.2 points per game at Grambling State. And they had a 55% run play rate despite going 4-7 and losing by an average of 10.4 points per game. Furthermore, not a single player in this offense had more than 112 rush attempts with 35 receptions. So everything was split in a committee and a bad offense that ran the ball a lot. As we know with Jeff Fisher, great mustache, fun guy. Like his Twitter presence has been fantastic. Cody, I don't think Jeff Fisher has been grinding like new modern offenses and how to improve things. I think he wants to go out there, run the piss out of the ball. And when you start looking at the offense, we got 4 tight ends. It's the only team in the league with only 4 wide receivers. Like we're hearing Paxton Lynch being compared to Josh Allen as a potential like rush heavy quarterback behind Shea Patterson. I gave the Panthers the 4 spot. Maybe that's too high, man. All I know is that, them being treated as this prohibitive favorite is absolutely ludicrous.
I think it does come on the heels of Jeff Fisher just having, can you call it success at the NFL level, but being an NFL coach for as long as he was, and credit to him. And I don't want to come in here and disparage Jeff Fisher. I've already done enough of that. But like just listening to those RJ Young interviews, and he did a whole series with all of these head coaches. He was the one that was easiest for me not to be attracted to. Like if I was a player or if like I was a media personality or anything, like he was the easiest one to just kind of dislike. Some of the things that he said about, I felt like I got the Rams to the Super Bowl. They just didn't take me with them after he got fired by the Rams. Things like that just make you not particularly like this guy. And as you mentioned, this is the one where I was talking about Andrews loves spring league football. Andrews loves minor league football. Jeff Fisher, does he love minor league football? Is he really here to be a force in this league, or is he just here because he's Jeff Fisher and he's got the mustache? I don't know, but it gets
someone asked him to do it. He said yes, and he's like, "Oh shit, it's actually here. I got to do this now."
His offensive coordinator Eric Marty might be an even bigger concern. He's the creator of what he has dubbed the tight end driven multiple gun offense.
Oh my God.
He sells an entire series on CoachTube. So his information, his offense is obviously so good that he's got to give out the information for $39.99 in a VHS. So I'm extremely nervous about what he's going to do with this offense. A 55% rush rate when he was getting demolished at Grambling State is not something that inspires too much confidence. I think this is going to be an offense that just plays not to lose games. They're going to establish the run. Shout out to establish the run. They're going to establish it, and they're going to use the Shea Patterson, Paxton Lynch dual quarterback thing. I think Paxton Lynch is going to come in for a couple rushing attempts a game, maybe throw a few passes. I think the quarterbacks are entirely out of play. But I think that the reason that they're getting love in the betting markets and just people that haven't paid too much attention to the league is because of the Jeff Fisher name.
With Shea Patterson, like the Paxton Lynch comment is what's scaring me off him because relative to a lot of these other quarterbacks, Shea Patterson, I think, was better in college at Michigan and even Ole Miss there. And, you look at him, the 4.71 40-yard dash, he did pop around a couple NFL training camps, but he also couldn't really catch on in the spring league or the CFL. And again, just having Fisher there in an offense is going to be run first. I'm mostly going to be fading this passing game. Shout out to, again, one of the spring league highlights, one of the few spring league highlights we got, LaMichael Petway, a tight end, had like a sick touchdown catch. I think it was like a 4th and 8, and Patterson got an offsides and just chucked it deep. So that was fun. But when we have 4 tight ends to worry about in this absolutely ridiculous offense, I love that CoachTube, data you were able to drive up there. It's just tough to get behind anyone in this passing game. We do have Lance Lenore, Jeff Badette, Ray Bolden, Devin Ross. So some familiar names. I'm just not convinced they're going to be throwing the ball around enough. Maybe we can get some usage out of the running back room, though. Stevie Scott, Reginald Corbin, and Cameron Scarlett, all the big 3 there. Scott, 6'1", 225 pounds, profiles as the lead back with that draft capital. Is he the guy you think we should be going after? We do have, some semblance of a potential pass down floor. With that said, Scarlett, also a big guy. Corbin might be the best pass down back of the group.
I think this is another 3-back committee, but I do think that Stevie Scott is the lead back. It looks like all these guys could potentially profile, if necessary, as a true workhorse. I just don't think they'll be used in that manner. Now, if we're right about the run-heavy offense and just wrong about how efficient it is or how inefficient it is, if this is a run-first offense and they're efficient, then there is going to be a ton of value with somebody like Stevie Scott, who is going to get obviously 2-down work, is going to get attempts near the goal line if they make it there. And that's somebody that could just rack up enough points without a huge rush, without a huge pass game upside to get us there. So I have a little bit of interest. I do have him as like a clear RB1, but still in a 3-back committee with Cameron Scarlett as kind of the clear third guy, and Reggie Corbin mixing in there a little bit more than him.
And that is something to keep in mind with this. Maybe this offensive line is full of badasses and they're going to be able to run the ball at a high level and be a great USFL team. The whole idea of passing the ball more is usually more so at the NFL level, where the passing games are so efficient that it does make sense to throw the ball more. But college and high school, man, like you do see situations where teams are so good running the ball that it actually is safer to do that. So we're not completely writing off Jeff Fisher and folks, but based on just the, again, shreds, tiny amount of data we have, I do think he deserves to be at least drop down from that prohibitive number one favorite that a lot of people are treating him as. Again, any real notes on this pass game, man? I just think I don't hate the quarterback room. Like, that's why I have them fourth. I think Patterson and Lynch, relative to some of these other rooms, actually are, like, you could argue they're top 4, top 5 collectively, but I just think right now there's so much uncertainty in this potential 4 tight end offense. I'd rather just take wide receivers from either of New Orleans, Tampa Bay, or Philadelphia instead.
Yeah, I agree with you. The notes that Jeff Fisher had on Paxton Lynch's usage and using him like Josh Allen to run was definitely concerning. I don't think you can go into week 1 expecting to use either of these guys, but they might be able to support a pass catcher if this team is at least 50-50 run pass, which I don't expect them to be. But Shea Patterson was good against Big Ten competition, or better than average against Big Ten competition, which is something to say. And though he couldn't catch on really past the spring league in CFL, he is one of the better quarterbacks in this league. We have to admit it. Even as much as Jeff Fisher is clouding our Michigan Panthers judgments, Shea Patterson is one of the better quarterbacks in the USFL.
I use some of PFF's more stable metrics, when trying to predict college quarterbacks to NFL. And Shea Patterson, his last 2 years in Michigan, 91.9 passing grade from a clean pocket. That was 16th among 133 qualified quarterbacks. He was 43rd on standard dropbacks, 58th first and second down, 39th with no play action. Good, not amazing. We understand it's not amazing. There's a reason why he's in the USFL. But again, better than a lot of these quarterbacks we're about to talk about. Takes us right to the Pittsburgh Maulers. Cody, other than the Panthers, man, I think the Maulers are profiling as potentially our, most run-heavy team. The name fits. We got head coach Kirby Wilson, who has spent like the last 20 years just being an NFL running back coach all over the place. And then we have offensive coordinator John Tomlinson. Maybe some of the most hilarious stats that I've pulled up from this guy. Quarterback coach and pass game coordinator for D3 Juanita College. I couldn't find how long he was there, but the last 3 years they went 0-10, 2-8, and 1-9. In the last season specifically, they reached 17 points in 2 of their 10 games. And despite all this, they ran the ball on 53% of their plays. Cody, what is wrong with these teams, man? Just throw the ball. You're getting killed and you're terrible. Like, this is a red flag to me. Again, maybe they are built to run the ball. Maybe Kirby Wilson is going to get these boys ready and they're going to be tough and everything. But my God, man, like Kyle Luletta, their quarterback, I think is a top 4, top 5 USFL quarterback. But damn it, man, it's so tough to just get behind him based on what we're looking at in these coaches.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. This coaching staff is wild because Kirby Wilson, a running backs coach, seemingly a guy that just loved to be a running backs coach for his entire NFL career. That ended shortly, not too long ago. And then he brings in an offensive coordinator who, as you just mentioned, was at D3 Juanita College and was still running 53% of the time when his teams were getting absolutely dusted. So you give me a running backs coach who, of course, wants his teams to run the ball and said as much on RJ Young's podcast, said he wants to establish the run, commit to owning the line of scrimmage. And then he's got this guy from Juanita College that just wants to apparently establish it when they're getting their asses kicked too. It doesn't leave me much confidence with the quarterback position. I don't think Lauletta is going to have even enough volume, even if he's extremely efficient, to do anything. He's not a running quarterback himself. So I think that they're just going to lean on this two-back running attack, which we're both pretty excited about, and go from there.
And yeah, that was kind of my takeaway on Kyle Lauletta too. Like, okay, 8-4 touchdown to INT ratio in the preseason. It was 46 among 59 guys in adjusted completion rate. He wasn't good in the preseason, but believe it or not, he was better than some of these other guys. And yeah, just when you look ahead at this potential offense, he doesn't run the ball, and he's probably not going to throw the ball enough either. And maybe he is a good real-life quarterback. I don't think he's going to be a good fantasy quarterback in the USFL. The one redeeming quality, though, Cody, is that we have our second and only two-back backfield, Tampa Bay and Pittsburgh, the only two teams rolling with this. Garrett Groshek, RB1, Madre London, RB2. I think. Now, De'Veon Smith was their original RB2. They did pick Groshek in the first round. I would have been more willing to believe Groshek could possibly be a fullback if they had kept De'Veon Smith and if they had not also signed a true fullback in Mikey Daniel after the fact. So maybe London is pretty involved too. You know, you look at them, Groshek's 5'11", 220 pounds, London's 6'1", 218 pounds. Both these guys theoretically can work across all three downs. We did see Groshek, though, far more used as a receiver at Wisconsin compared to London at Michigan State and Tennessee. Groshek, man, I think is firmly in the conversation for RB2 behind only BJ Emmons.
I was with you thinking that, man, like, and I hate to do this thing just like looking at the guy, but if you look at Garrett Groshek, he looks like a fullback, like has a classic like fullback mullet, big.
He is massive. White. Let's just call a spade a spade.
He's about to be Darius Sanders 2.0. This dude is a massive white dude with a mullet, and you're like, there's no way he can carry the rock 20 times at the professional level, can he? Well, I think he's about to. If you listen again to those RJ Young podcasts, like Kirby Wilson is a true football guy. Like he's a football guy's football guy, and he talked about trusting his players, and he mentioned even about specifically about Groshek. He says he knows there's somebody faster. He knows there's somebody bigger, but there's no one that's going to outwork Groshek. And like the fact that they waived whatever De'Veon Smith, who was the leading running back in the AAF and XFL, like that sealed it for me. I had this thing like as a 60-40 split in favor of De'Veon Smith. He gets cut. They bring in a dude in Madre London who was an absolute baller at the European League of Football. You've got the page pulled up there, but like 2,000 yards rushing, 24 total touchdowns across 11 games. And he was the MVP. And this wasn't like a thing specific to the European League of Football where like running backs just go nuts. He had over 1,000 yards more than the next closest running back. So I think the guy that they brought in is a capable running back. I just think that Wilson is a guy who is willing to, until proven otherwise, give Garrett Groshek the rock. And so I'm pegging this now a 50, 55, 45 type of split in favor of Groshek, who I think is going to get a lot of opportunities in this offense.
Garrett Groshek, truly a top 2 RB. Most of my DraftKings roster is going to have him or BJ Emmons in that RB spot. Faux show. With the wide receiver room, again, it's just a projected run-first offense, man. So no offense to Jeffrey Thomas, Bailey Gaither, Brandon Mack, Delvin Hardaway, or Trey Walker. I'm just not so sure where the volume's going to be at tight end, Matt Siebert and Hunter Thedford. It is only 2 tight ends, but you look at the guys, and neither of them really put up big numbers. And again, we're just not going to worry too much about tight ends. We do have Mack. Excuse me, still learning. I'm not 100% with all these names yet. Give me a little bit of a break here, everyone. Brandon Mack, is 6'5", 217 pounds, led the Power 5 in contested catches, recently in 2020. And when you look at Thomas, just 5'9", 175 pounds, I could see Gaither and Mack on the outside with Thomas in the slot. But Cody, it might just be a situation where there's not enough volume for any of these guys to give us much fantasy usefulness.
If you're looking for anybody and you're getting completely off the board, looking ahead to week 1, I think Brandon Mack is that guy. He offers a size plus college production profile that you can get excited about. He had a 24.4% target share in his junior season at Temple. This is going to be a run-first offense. We like the quarterback play, I think, at least relative to league average. But I just don't think that one of these guys is going to separate enough, especially in a run-first offense, to really be too fantasy viable unless you're just getting completely off the board from the jump.
That was the Pittsburgh Maulers, my 5th ranked team, plus 600 title odds. As we get to the next 3 teams, I'm more willing to give, I think, Pittsburgh a little bit. Okay, I'd put them probably in the same tier as the New Jersey Generals, our next team, and then I think our 7th and 8th teams are clearly the 2 worst in the league. But let's start off with the New Jersey Generals, plus 700 odds. Mike Riley. So Mike Riley is also getting the band back together. The problem is the band was never really good to begin with. This is just like the poor man's version of what they're doing in Philadelphia. I feel like, man, like Riley. He's been the head coach of the AAF San Antonio Commanders. More recently, he was the OC for the XFL Seattle Dragons. These teams weren't terrible, but I thought he picked the wrong quarterback both times, man. Like we have Brandon Silver starting over BJ Daniels, then Logan Woodside, who is inexplicably still the Titans backup quarterback. I have no idea how. Every year when I do my backup quarterback ranks, I put him near the bottom, but they picked Woodside over Marquise Williams, who's most well known for beating out Trubisky out of North Carolina. I think the favorite moment in my sad AAF ranking life was when I ranked Marquise Williams ahead of Christian Hackenberg in a week where Williams was not starting and Hackenberg was. Hackenberg got benched. I was right, nailed that QB8, QB9 week 3 AAF quarterback ranking spot. I'm sure everyone remembers that as well. Anyway, with this offense, we can really look right at the Seattle Dragons because, Steve Smith was the O-line coach for the Dragons. He's now going to be the offensive coordinator for the Generals. I mean, this was the second most run-heavy offense in the XFL. I mean, 53.5 pass play rate in non-garbage time situations. They were 7th in yards per attempt. They were 6th in yards per carry. This was not a good offense. And Cody, we saw this with San Antonio and Seattle. This man loves using 3 running backs. I think we're going to get kind of a run-heavy offense that uses a lot of running backs. And then when they throw the ball, who knows how good it's going to be because their first-round quarterback, Ben Holmes, was already injured and released. That means we'll either get Deandre Johnson or, again, another developmental league mainstay, Luis Perez under center. I reject this idea that Perez is good at all. What the hell?
Yes.
What is this, man? As people never watched a single snap of AAF or XFL, this dude is maybe the slowest quarterback in the league with his feet, and his decision-making isn't much better. Last preseason, talking about Justin Fields. So absolutely pitiful performance from Perez in the AAF. He was a little better in the XFL, but he didn't start. Matt McGloin beat him out and then proceeded to tell the cameras at halftime that their offensive game plan was shit. And only then did Luis Perez actually find the field, man. So I don't love the coaching staff. I don't love Luis Perez. We don't know much about Deandre Johnson other than the fact that he was a former Florida State recruit and last chance U-star. So whole lot of mysteries here in New Jersey, man.
You mentioned the quarterback stuff off the front, too, with Mike Riley making the wrong choice twice in these developmental leagues. He's going to do it again here with Luis Perez, man. I think Luis Perez is going to come off the street as a free agent quarterback and start over Deandre Johnson. And when your team isn't that good to begin with, or at least doesn't look that good on paper, or even look at your past success as the Commanders head coach or as the Seattle Dragons offensive coordinator, do something that gives you a little bit of variance and some upside. And Deandre Johnson is that, at least. We know what we have with Luis Perez. He's going to be a 55% completion rate type of guy. He's going to have basically a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's not going to inspire much confidence in any passing game. So use a guy in Deandre Johnson that has at least shown the ability to run the ball. I don't think he's going to do that. I think we're going to get Luis Perez under center. And that pretty much takes a lot of these guys off the board for me. You mentioned the 3-back committee, Mike Weber, Trey Williams, Darius Victor. We've seen this before. Riley is just going to run a running back by committee. He had Trey Williams to the Seattle Dragons and the San Antonio Commanders. That made me excited when I saw that. They've got the draft capital. You've got the previous connection. But Trey Williams wasn't even the leading rusher on either of those teams. So now you got Mike Weber ahead of him. I think Mike Weber is at least in line for RB1 duties, but ahead of Trey Williams. And then I think that supplemental draft pick, Darius Victor, who played a bunch for the New York Guardians, is kind of the man that gets cleanup duties there. But yeah, I agree with your ranking and your assessment of Mike Riley's New Jersey Generals. I had to deal as a Nebraska Cornhusker fan. I had to deal with Mike Riley for way too many years. So I'm probably letting, again, my bias cloud my judgment here, but I'm out on the New Jersey Generals heading into week 1.
I love your point, though, to just give you a chance, at some upper, if you're gonna lose and get killed, but let's try to see if we can go out there and win. Mike Lombardi, just a staple in the fantasy community, NFL community. Sorry, but he always brings up that one quote. I forget who said it originally, but it was basically the number 1 swordsman in the world isn't afraid of the number 2 swordsman. He's afraid of the unorthodox swordsman. Sounds like Mike Riley is just going to, come to a sword fight against it, overmatched and still with the sword. I don't know, man, bring a grenade or something. Let's try to see what we can do with DeAndre Johnson. So I'm, I hope that Deandre Johnson wins the job, but, I would not be surprised at all if Luis Perez does end up, seizing that, like you said, or at least being pretty involved early. And no, we are not high on him as a rusher or passer in the USFL. Mike Weber, I feel like, is going to get a lot of hype, at least for week one, because he's one of the most well-known running backs dating back to his time at Ohio State. I don't dismiss the idea that he's good, but Cody, like, it's weird, man. From August to January every year, everyone agrees that running backs don't really matter. We're just chasing the opportunity. But from February to April, I see fantasy analysts that probably haven't. It's okay if you haven't played a game of football, but my God, can we spare this with, like, oh, look at this guy's vision, look at his tackle breaking ability. Like, I'm in a rookie draft, and I'm hearing someone talk about how Kenneth Walker is just a can't miss guy because of how good his vision and his patience is. That's fine. I'm not saying his vision and patience isn't great, but we're chasing these guys because everyone is saying he's going to be a number 2 running back pick, and that means he's going to get a lot of opportunities. So Mike Weber might be good, but yeah, we have Trey Williams. We know he's going to be involved, and Darius Victor is someone that's shown some pass down chops in the developmental leagues. I do think it'll be a 3-man running back room. And there's another big name here at wide receiver with Jamon Moore, former Packer, and another former NFLer, Darius Shepard. We did see Kevontae Turbin actually be the first wide receiver off the board. He is just 5'9", 155 pounds, though. So they picked him first. I'd expect him to probably be in the slot, but I think Jamon Moore probably deservedly is the number 1 guy in this offense. But man, Cody, like, I'm not going to put Jamon Moore in the top 3 to 4 wide receivers just because I've heard of the guy when everything else in the passing game seems like a red flag.
That's what the problem here is. I have Jamon Moore as one of my highest targeted players, highest target share going into week one. But how excited can you get about a team that's not going to be efficient and isn't going to pass a lot? So I think he's going to fall down the ranks a little bit just because of the overall passing offense, not having anything to do with his ability to earn targets, which I think he will do at a high level. To your point on Kevontae Turpin, 5'9", 155, I think that, and we talk about these quarterbacks being with their coaches as they were drafted. I think Kevontae Turpin was a little bit of a bone thrown to Ben Holmes' way because they played together in the spring league. I don't know why you would select a 5'8", 5'9", 155-pound wide receiver first when you've got other guys available, unless your quarterback tells you to. So with Ben Holmes injured, I'm sure Kevontae Turpin, just based off draft capital, I'm sure he's a great football player. I'm sure he's going to play a little bit. But yeah, I'm leaning on the guys that we know of, Jamon Moore and Darius Shepard, who have shown the ability to earn targets as NFL preseason players. And again, similar skill level here in the USFL. I just don't know how efficient and how pass heavy this offense will be as a whole.
Fun name that we've also seen on these former squads. Again, like, this is like a middle-class poor man's version of the Philadelphia Stars, I think, is Alonzo Moore. They went ahead and picked him up in the supplemental draft. Like, it makes sense to me if he gets out there in 3 wide receiver sets. I thought he did some good stuff, particularly with the Commanders in the AAF. But yeah, Jamon Moore, Darius Shepard should be prioritized here. Not loving it. Fun note I found with Nicholas Truesdell. Sadly, the best spot for a lot of these guys' info is Wikipedia. Apparently, Truesdell had an 80-catch, 977-yard, 23 touchdown receiving line in the Arena Football League back in the day. That sounds wrong. I wouldn't be shocked if it is, but you know what, Cody? It's April. We're talking about, going on 65 minutes talking about the USFL. I'm going to choose to believe that Nick Truesdell is a beast among boys. With that said, 3 tight end room, run heavy offense, probably just avoid them until proven otherwise. Anything else you want to say about Mike Riley's Generals?
One last note. We got to find somebody who loves us in this life as much as Mike Riley loves Alonzo Moore. He coached him for 3 seasons at Nebraska, had him at the AAF Commanders and the XFL Dragons. So they're together again here in the USFL. Mike Riley loves him some Alonzo Moore. Not that he's been overly productive at any of those stops, but he is going to see the field. That's for sure.
Last 2 teams. We got the Houston Gamblers plus 700. Best name in the USFL. Nobody is discounting that. Our Houston Gamblers, I'm fine with rooting for them. Head coach Kevin Sumlin, obviously longtime Houston, Texas A&M, most recently Arizona head coach. As we brought up with Mazzone, though, Arizona stretch didn't exactly end well. Final 3 offenses, 43rd, 77th, 119th in scoring, and had a pretty much like below average. I guess like based on college, 54.8% pass play rate isn't terrible. Maybe we do see them spread the ball out. Someone's certainly done that, every step of his career. But But man, oh man, I am terrified of trusting Clayton Thorsen, the former Northwestern quarterback. Like I was looking at when he got drafted, PFF sent out a nice tweet like, oh, like he's shown some upside and stuff. And then they put the advanced stats. I love PFF guys, and I know our social media managers work hard, but like every single advanced stat was like outside the top 80. I'm not sure how you can paint a picture of him being a good prospect. And my God, I think him and the next quarterback we're going to talk about, Alex Makuu, two probably single worst quarterbacks that we've seen in the preseason. I mean, Clayton Thorsen, it truly is just ridiculous. We've had 78 quarterbacks with at least 50 preseason dropbacks since 2019. Thorsen is 77th in PFF passing grade, 76th in QB rating, 77th in yards per attempt, dead last in adjusted completion rate. Backup Kenji Bahar rewrote the Monmouth record book. I would love to see him get a chance. Right now, though, man, I just don't really trust Clayton Thorsen. Maybe I should be putting more faith in Kevin Sumlin. What do you make out of this passing game? Because I'm not so far out on Sumlin, I guess, but I just don't believe in Clayton Thorsen.
Yeah, I'm with you on Sumlin. I think that I would peg this offense just a little bit better if we knew the quarterback play was going to be better, because I think we get up tempo. We know that Sumlin's been up tempo at all of his stops. Texas A&M, Arizona ran a play like every 21, 22 seconds, which is way up there in the college ranks. I know he's going to be up tempo. I know he's going to play with pace. But yeah, it is extremely hard to get excited about Clayton Thorsen. 58% completion rate in college at Northwestern, 6.3 yards per attempt, 3.6% touchdown rate. And then, as you mentioned, those preseason numbers, which we have about a two or three full game sample worth of pass attempts for him, 44.9% completion rate, just 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. This South Division is loaded. Yeah, this Houston quarterback room is pretty uninspiring. I'm not excited about Clayton Thorsen at all. And I'm with you on Kenji Bahar. I doubt he'll get a chance because Clayton Thorsen has the Division I chops, but it's just tough to get excited about this quarterback room in general.
Looking at the running back room, this one's interesting because the number 1 running back they picked, Dalen Dawkins, he's only 5'7", 183 pounds. You would think that they picked him first. Maybe they'll throw him the ball for a reason and stuff, but Devwah Whaley is 5'11", 212 pounds, and their second running back was Mark Thompson, who's 6'2", 235 pounds. When they actually drafted him and the USFL sent out the graphic, though, he was listed as a running back fullback. So there's a chance that this actually is a 2-backfield, and Thompson's used more exclusively as a fullback. With that in mind, Devwah Whaley could actually be the one that we see get the most overall touches here. He was a former 4-star recruit, went to Arkansas, flashed a little bit here and there, seemingly can work across all 3 downs. Are you with me that Whaley is maybe the underrated guy here? I know he went supplemental, which I, do feel a little bit risky, going out on a limb with that. But just based on kind of the height weight of Dawkins and Thompson, it does seem like Whaley is maybe a decent bet, as a contrarian play, if you will, behind our 2 obvious running backs we're trying to target.
And this was something we were just talking about in our internal Slack channel at ETR, just trying to get our target share projections and rush share projections in line for week 1. Was, do we discount these supplemental guys, or was there maybe a reason they weren't ready for the main draft? And if they were in the main draft, they would have gotten drafted higher. We don't know because that information just isn't out there. So we're leaning towards just kind of discounting that supplemental draft capital. But I kind of agree with you. Mark Thompson's a massive dude, and the fact that he is listed as a running back / fullback can be concerning. I will say that on that RJ Young series, someone talked a lot about using diversity with his running backs and having them split out wide, and obviously using them as running backs, and mentioned Mark Thompson specifically by name. So I think he'll certainly be involved in a 3-back committee, but I do think it's just that. I think we see Dalen Dawkins as the preferred pass catcher with the higher draft capital. Mark Thompson used in short yardage, goal line situations, possibly even on early downs, and then Devwah Whaley mixing in both with the ability to catch passes and run. So I'm not saying it's a complete stay away, but I do think Mark Thompson will mix in enough on early downs to definitely have this group rated below the other 2 that we talked about.
That'd be fun to feature Thompson. I'm all for big dudes getting the rock 20 plus times. Like, screw it. We're playing football in the spring. Let's get weird out here. I just need to keep an eye on exactly what position he's going to be playing. Wide receiver room, number 1 guy, Isaiah Zuber. Number 2, Jojo Ward. 3, Anthony Ratliff Williams. Man, this one's just kind of all over the place, though, because they don't have a single player weighing over 201 pounds. Tyler Simmons is 6'2". He's the only receiver over 6'1". So when I see Zuber and Ward, I know, they're not very big, but I think that one of them is probably going to be on the outside. I think it could be Jojo Ward, man. I was pulling up some of his highlights at Hawaii where he had 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns in his final season in 2019. And they were using him downfield like a lot. Like he was not just being schemed these low A-dot touches or anything like that. So I think Zuber and Ward are the two guys to attack here. How many chances are we going to get to have catchable balls from Clayton Thorsen is another story. It does seem like this offense, though, at least compared to, the previous ones, Pittsburgh Maulers and Michigan Panthers and some of those more run-heavy groups, we might actually have, a larger pie for the overall target share.
Yeah, I agree. And Zuber was a guy that I was interested in. Height weight profile doesn't do a whole lot for me, but the ability for him to earn targets at the college level was pretty impressive. Had a 29.6% target share and 26.9% target share before transferring colleges and then dealing with SEC competition where he struggled quite a bit. But then preseason, and this is sometimes we don't have a big sample to go off of, ran 38 routes with New England in 2021, earned 9 targets, good for 23.6% target share, targets per route run. So you kind of have to use this information in combination with draft capital. First overall wide receiver drafted for this team. I've got him pegged with one of the league's higher target shares as well. I think he has the capability of separating from this group that the guys below him didn't show much either and didn't show an ability to earn targets at lower levels of football as well. So I think Zuber can separate. Again, we just go back to the fact that we don't know how pass heavy this offense will be or how efficient it's going to be. So I like Zuber. I think he's an interesting name to keep an eye on. I just don't know overall within the terms of this offense if he's going to be a fantasy target in week 1.
Houston Gamblers, number 7 ranked team. Again, I love the name. I'm sorry, Houston. I hope you guys prove me wrong. Dead last team, though, number 8 is going to be the Birmingham Stallions, plus 700 championship odds, led by head coach Skip Holtz. 58, I would have taken the over on that age, just kind of based on his dad and everything, but not exactly, the oldest guy, but he spent the previous 17 years leading East Carolina, South Florida, and Louisiana Tech. Had some success throughout the years, not so much recently, though. Last 5 years, college football is 48th, 97th, 35th, 78th, and 70th ranked scoring offenses. And I mentioned this before, but man, I think it was even 3 additions, at least the last 2, didn't even have a 2,000-yard passer, 1,000-yard rusher, or 650-yard receiver. 57.7% pass play rate. I don't know if that he's necessarily going to be pounding the ball, but this is where we get to the quarterback room. Alex Makuu, yeah, the Seahawks took him in the 7th round, but since then, basically nothing to feel all that good about. 44th among 59 qualified quarterbacks, PFF preseason passing grade, 53rd QB rating, 53rd yards per attempt, a little bit better, 25th in adjusted completion rate. He did have 535 career rushing yards and 16 touchdowns at Florida International. Maybe he actually does emerge as, a better fantasy quarterback than real life quarterback. The problem, Cody, is I think his leash might be shorter than almost anyone else because Jamar Davis-Smith, their backup, was with Skip Holtz at Louisiana Tech. What say you?
I think, and this is good, we can end our team-by-team previews on a little bit of a disagreement. I would have the Birmingham Stallions ranked higher than Michigan Panthers, ranked higher than the New Jersey Generals, and on the same tier, maybe higher than the Houston Gamblers. So I'm not nearly as low as you are. I do think that this offense will be a little bit more pass heavy just based on some of the things that Skip Holtz did at the college level and how I think that'll translate here to the USFL. I'm not excited about Alex Makuu. I wish, can we pronounce it McGough? Because it shouldn't be Makuu. If your name is Makuu, you just have to pronounce it McGough and make that a soft F there at the end. But he went 62 of 114 for 54% completion rate, a 1-for-1 TD to interception ratio in his preseason career. Not bad, not terrible, not something that gets you extremely excited, but I agree with you. Short leash. And if he does have to turn over the reins to Jamar Davis-Smith, I think that will be good in turn for the overall offense because I think he's got a little bit more dynamic ability to his game. But the receivers are what gets me a little bit more excited. I like some of the receivers on this roster, and I think that they can help propel poor quarterback play if that's what we get.
Victor Bolden, Osiris Mitchell, Peyton Ramsey, Manasseh Bailey, Marlon Williams, and Michael Darius at wide receiver. Victor Bolden was the first pick, had a nice 3-year stint with the Lions. Again, we'll take any, if we can actually get past preseason and practice squads, that is a huge positive. Also got to take a look at Mitchell, 6'5", 210 pounds, did score 14 touchdowns during his career at Mississippi State. Original number 2 wide receiver, Emmanuel Hall, one of the other few names that people might be familiar with. Yeah. He was released and throws a bit of a wrench in this equation, but it sounds like Bolden might be someone that you are projecting to have one of the higher target shares to start.
I do think Bolden's going to separate. Now, there was a wrench thrown into our Bolden projection initially just based off of the addition of Marlon Williams in the supplemental draft as well. I think Marlon Williams is a guy that can certainly earn targets in this offense. But we do have a pretty good projection on Victor Bolden. I think he'll be one of the most targeted players in week 1. And, I guess I'm a little bit more higher on Makuu than you might be, and a little bit more higher on this offense being a little bit pass happy from the get-go. But I think that we see Victor Bolden separate from the rest of these guys outside of maybe Marlon Williams, who I think will also compete for targets.
We will find out who is correct on the Birmingham squad when we actually see football being played, Cody. So I am happy we did make it through this with at least one disagreement here. We will see what Birmingham brings to the table. Real quickly before we finish the running back room, this one's interesting to me because there's 3 guys and they all 3 have shown enough pass catching chops, and their size is decent enough that you can kind of envision any one of them being able to be given a 3-down role. The problem is, when we have 3 pretty even running backs, we tend to just think it's going to be a 3-back committee. But Jordan Chunn was the real interesting one to me because he's 6 feet tall, 230 pounds, but he caught 84 passes, during his career at Troy. So we were talking before about, just the hope that Mark Thompson gets a major role over there in Houston. I feel the same way about Jordan Chunn. With that said, gun to my head, I do think we're just going to see another 3-back committee here.
I'll go one step further. I think we're going to see a 4-back committee because we have Bobby Holly listed as a tight end, but I think there was an official graphic that was released recently, and he's listed as an RB/fullback / tight end. And he was specifically talking about how much he thought the run game was going to be a factor for this offense. So maybe a little bit of a ding for my pass happy approach. But I think we're going to see 4 guys potentially carry the ball in this offense. And I'm with you, man. If one of them is going to separate, I hope it's Jordan Chunn, who can certainly catch passes out of the backfield. But I'm just concerned that we're going to see Bobby Holly, who is officially a tight end, also get a couple attempts per game.
Cody and I are going to get to week 1 matchups real quick. Before we do that, I just want to give a quick shout out to my lovely company, PFF. Right now, you can get 50% off a PFF Elite annual subscription if you use code DRAFT50. With 365 days of Elite, you can get all the PFF locked article content, PFF's NFL draft guide, a completely unlocked mock draft simulator, data and grades from the entire 2021 season, upcoming 2022 season, and of course, countless amounts of USFL content throughout the spring. That's promo code DRAFT50 for 50% off a PFF Elite annual subscription. And also, PFF is launching Hutch, a 4-part podcast series with #1 overall NFL draft prospect Aiden Hutchinson on April 13th. The show includes interviews with Jim Harbaugh, current and former Michigan football players, key members of Aiden's family, media members, and draft analysts. Check out Hutch on April 13th. I'm sorry, PFF. It seems like a great project. Aiden Hutchinson seems like a great guy. He also ripped my freaking heart out as a Buckeye fan 6 months ago. So excuse me for not being thrilled about this series, but it is, a great opportunity to get inside the mind of a #1 overall pick. Awfully cool. And I know Austin Gale, really poured his heart and soul into that project. Shout out to Dave Safaro for making it happen in the first place. So keep an eye out for Hutch on April 13th. My Columbus listeners out there, probably there with me, but, every other city and state in the world / country should be tuning in. Also, quick shout out to our friends over at Manscaped. Only true guaranteed quality pickup this season is Manscaped, the leaders in below the waist grooming. With Manscaped Performance Package 4.0, your skill position will be sleek and smooth enough for a sub 4.340. Support us and head to manscaped.com and use the exclusive code PFF at checkout for 20% off and free shipping. Again, that's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com and use code PFF. Turn your Mr. Irrelevant to a first-round pick with Manscaped. Cody, we've broken down these teams. Let's make some picks for week 1. Why the hell not? New Jersey Generals at the Birmingham Stallions, April 16th. That's Saturday, 7:30 p.m. This one's going to be on Fox, NBC, and Peacock. I've seen the spreads adjusted now to Birmingham being favored by 3.5 points. The over-under's at 49.5. I am taking New Jersey plus 3.5. It is concerning betting on a team that, has already lost their starting quarterback. But once again, I am just really down on Alec McGough compared to, just general consensus. So I'm going with the Generals at plus 3.5. And again, we're taking the under everywhere. Who you got here?
Yeah, my pick, absolutely the under. I don't know how either of these quarterbacks put up more than 50 points combined. I don't know if I can lay the 3.5 with the Birmingham Stallions as much as I'm more excited about them than I am dealing with my Mike Riley led Generals. So I will side with you, plus 3.5 on the Generals, where I think these teams are fairly evenly matched. Give me the plus 3.5 on the Generals.
2.5, 1.5, I'd be okay just taking, if you thought Birmingham was better, go ahead. 3.5, miss me with that. 3 games on Sunday. Houston Gamblers at the Michigan Panthers, April 17th. Again, this one's at noon on NBC and Peacock. Cool note I found, if you do happen to live in Birmingham, I think 1 ticket actually gets you in for the entire day. So you have to check out all the games. Might have to, get a plane ticket down there at some point. What the hell? Why not? Michigan 3.5 point favorites. The over-under is at 47.5. I don't like the Gamblers. We've been over that. I had them ranked below the Panthers. With that said, Jeff Fisher, favored by 3.5. Missed me with that. I got the Gamblers plus 3.5.
I'm tailing you on this one, man. I'm riding this Jeff Fisher fade as far as I can. Again, give me the under 47.5. I don't know how these run heavy offenses get over 47.5, but give me the Panther or give me the Gamblers plus 3.5.
I hate these week 1 matchups because I wish we just had more obvious, run first, bad offenses with our good quarterbacks, because we got the Philadelphia Stars at the New Orleans Breakers, 4 p.m. on Sunday. You can catch that one on USA. Philadelphia, as we talked about, with all that continuity from the spring league, is favored by 2.5, over under sitting at 46.5. I am going to take the Breakers plus 2.5. I do believe in Kyle Sloter. I have them ranked 1 spot ahead. This one's tough, though. And if there was one spread to maybe stay away from, you could argue all of them. What the hell are you guys betting on spring, USFL football for in the first place? But, objectively, I do think this is the one I'm most unsure about. So if there was a chance to maybe grab the money line, wouldn't be a bad move. I am going to take the Breakers plus 2.5, though.
I'm going to side with the familiarity in the Philadelphia Stars. I will lay the minus 2.5 points here with them. Give me Andrews. Give me Brian Scott. Give me all the offensive linemen, all the wide receivers that they're bringing over. I think they have a big, big advantage in week 1. We'll see how that plays out through the rest of the season. But in week 1, I think they have an advantage over the Breakers.
You know what? I'm changing my pick. I'm going with the Stars minus 2.5 because what you said, Cody, it just sounded better. I was second guessing myself my entire explanation. So, I changed that for the article. I love putting my, stuff on Twitter or talking to in a podcast before publishing an article. Look at all you people out to maybe, check me on my bullshit sometimes. Final game here, Tampa Bay Bandits at the Pittsburgh Maulers. Sunday night, 8 p.m. on FS1. Tampa Bay favored by 2.5. The over-under is at 48.5. This is the one matchup where I think we do have a pass-heavy good offense going up against a team we're expecting to just run the piss out of the ball. Cody, are we both on Bandits minus 2.5?
Yeah, if we're wrong, we're going to be really wrong here, man, because we think that this Maulers team is just going to continue to pound the rock as Todd Haley, Jordan Ta'amu, and this Bandits offense, this high-powered Bandits offense, continues to throw it down their throats. Man, I think they win by double digits fairly easily. I think this is a pretty bad line. I hope we're right. We have no information to base this off of other than what these teams and what these coaches have done at various other levels of football. But I think the Bandits are the number 1 team in the league.
Cody, we have been talking about USFL now for 84 minutes. I think that's 84 minutes than most people in their lives have spent on this great league. But I feel, really great going into week 1. I'm sure you do as well, man. And we will be so much more smarter about this league this time next week. I'm praying if you're listening out there, whatever kind soul was breaking up the XFL games, removing the commercials and posting those 30, 40-minute videos on YouTube, please do that again because otherwise fast forwarding through all that shit is going to get annoying. But Cody, fantastic stuff, man. Our first time podcasting together. Truly a pleasure. I know all the listeners appreciate you as well. Let the folks know where we can find you on social media and all the great stuff that Established the Run has to offer. You guys, I know you're kind of leading up your niche. I never quite know what the proper pronunciation is for there, but everything you do at the collectibles and the showdown slates, man, truly one of the biggest grinders in the industry. And all of us fellow DJs appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, this was a huge help for my process going over this podcast with you and getting some takes from you as well. At CMain7 on Twitter, but don't worry about the Twitter stuff. You guys need to get this USFL information directly from establishedtherun.com. If you made it this far into the podcast, almost an hour and a half, and are still here, you are going to be grinding week 1 DFS. You're going to be placing bets. You're going to be placing prop bets if you can. So for week 1 and every week of the USFL season, we will have projections for every player in every game, ownership projections for both main and showdown slate, tiered top plays for each main slate, and a weekly live show with me, Levitan, and a couple of rotating guests from the ETR crew. Obviously, you'll also have access to me in the private subscriber-only Discord as well. So if you guys have questions, player takes that you want to fire off, or anything that you want to get my eyeballs on, I will be there helping out as well. So I am so excited about this product launching and so excited about week 1 kicking off this week.
Is it a singular USFL product, or is it kind of like you just buy into established run, you get everything?
It is a single USFL product. The league will go for 10 regular season weeks, and then, as you mentioned, we'll have the championship weeks. It is $119.99, and that'll cover you for the length of the season. So roughly 3 months of content for $119.99. Hopefully, best in the industry. We will be grinding, and we're very excited about this. We think we're going to get some pretty good sized prize pools over on DraftKings, and hopefully a full menu of other options as well.
Fully in on those DFS streets. Make sure you check out Cody's awesome team previews. Those are the ones that are actually free. But come on, people, like Cody was saying, if you've listened to us for this long, clearly you're a fellow DJ. Get in those streets. Go get yourself a subscription over at establishedrun.com. Always improving. You guys just got a golf product. I mean, Adam Levitin, my first true boss in the industry. So love that, man. Evan Silva, I maintain, still the GOAT, everything he does. So go to the USFL. And I mean, this is why I love USFL so much, man. These spring leagues, like if you are a content provider out there, like why wouldn't you take the opportunity to go into this league where we don't have, guys that might be good at their job, but let's face it, in any business across the world, I'm sure you guys see in whatever job you have, like there's a boss, there's a worker, it's just been there for 15 years and they put their time in and they still, just have a really big pull, not necessarily based on how good they are anymore, but based on who they are and how long they've been doing it. It's a brand new league. The best should be rising to the top. So man, I got to talk to some college hilariously had me in the talk, like in their analytics group or whatever. And my big takeaway for them was just like if you want to separate yourself, man, why not go into this brand new league where none of that, hierarchy exists? Like are you going to come out with the 700,000th mock draft in the last week and just have people find you that way? Like there's time for that. I'm not saying you need to ignore these draft prospects, but it's 4 games. And I think a great opportunity to watch real freaking football and have a good time. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Again, we will be back with more USFL content throughout the season. Even Dwayne McFarland, I have ripped his arm enough that he's going to be giving us the utilization report and some other goodness throughout the year. So stay tuned for that. For Cody, I'm Ian. Thanks so much for tuning in to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.